Hello, welcome to the Sound of Science, the place where we deconstruct unscientific bogus and silly scams. Let's go get them. Hello, my fellow critical thinkers. Today I would like to talk about a man called John B. Andelin or Andelin. I hope I pronounce his name properly. He is an American medical doctor of sorts who now makes YouTube videos in which he mostly tries to debunk evolution. His YouTube channel is called Mask of Science. Sci-Man-Dan made a video about him the other day, prompting me to have a look at the Mask of Science channel myself. And Mr. Andelin belongs to this specific category of man who present themselves as being scientifically educated, but then they have no clue as to what science really is. Mr. Andelin specifically calls himself John Andelin, MD, and when he starts talking, you immediately know within the first minute that he is kind of a nut job, which I think is a very remarkable phenomenon. How can someone who was educated at university, who provides medical treatment to people, be so deluded? Up front, I must say that this guy says so many weird and crazy stuff that I can only address a small portion of it. Having said that, let's listen to him.
Today I'm going to discuss the core reason why evolution's false. It's false because it could be mathematically proven to be impossible. Whatever evidences are presented, be it philosophical arguments or a fragmented line of fossils, you can forget about any possibility of evolution because it fails all mathematical tests.
This already should raise a first red flag. He says that evolution is mathematically impossible, which is kind of a strange thing to say, because evolution is not primarily a mathematical phenomenon. It's not some mathematical hypothesis of sorts, so you can't really disprove its existence. With math, the theory of evolution is mainly based upon careful, empirical observation and analysis of the diversity of organisms and their fossils, later on supported by DNA technology. Its basics are not really rooted in math, so math does not offer you much opportunity to disprove evolution. But let's continue.
In order for a theory to be considered scientific, it must be subjected to mathematical challenges. And if a theory cannot pass mathematical tests, it should be immediately discarded.
Oh no, this is also a big red flag, because randomly quoting Leonardo da Vinci doesn't prove anything about science. Da Vinci said this more than 5 centuries ago. Modern science didn't really exist yet. Da Vinci was a genius, but that doesn't mean that everything he said is now equal to some scientific law. If you claim that every scientific theory needs to be proven mathematically, then you first would need to prove that in itself. That is your claim. And you can't prove that claim with just showing a random Da Vinci quote dating back 5 centuries. It doesn't prove anything.
Remember that mathematics is the purest of all science. Hard sciences such as physics and chemistry are ultimately founded on mathematical proofs. However, the theory of evolution is based on philosophical arguments and fails all mathematical tests.
No, the theory of evolution is not based upon a philosophical argument. It's based upon empirical evidence resulting from observation and analysis of organisms and their fossils, and upon DNA technology. So this is not a good start for someone who presents himself as a doctor.
It's important to understand that nature is always random. So the question remains, can random forces produce order?
No, nature is not always random. Why? If you're a scientist, you should understand that. For example, there is gravity, and it works in a way that particles are not randomly moving through the universe, but instead they are drawn together, and that is how stars and planets are formed. So in this universe, not everything is random. We see clear natural patterns. For example, because of gravity, moons, planets, and stars, they have the tendency of getting a spherical shape. That is because gravity pulls the particles that moons, planets, and stars consist of towards the center of gravity, which is the middle of the object, which will basically always result in a spherical shape if the object is large enough and if enough time passes. And galaxies tend to have a spiraling form. Nature is not always random. Natural processes often lead to patterns, and science can describe and even predict these patterns. Let me give you another example of nature being perfectly capable of producing patterns without any design. Just throw a random rock in a pond. Look at what happens. You will witness a whole range of perfectly round circles moving away from the place where the rock landed in the water, and those circles move with the same speed through the water, and no matter what kind of rock you throw in that water, you will always get a pattern of circles moving with the exact same speed. That is pure order, and it's produced by nature without any planning or design. So right off the bat, you're wrong in so many ways, and it's going to get worse.
Anyone can immediately determine which one of these stones was intelligently designed. About 300 of these spherical stones were discovered in the forests of Costa Rica a number of years ago. Of course, it's self-evident that these were intelligently created, and why? Why couldn't natural forces have created such a stone? Because a spherical stone has order, in that every point on the surface is equidistant from the center. Now, if you could calculate the number of possible random shapes of a spherical stone would be one of those shapes. But it would be one out of billions and billions of possible shapes. So although you could argue that random forces could create such a stone, you need to consider that the number of possible random shapes far exceeds the number of stones on Earth.
Sweet mother of Gandalf! This guy is so clueless. He makes deluded statements in about every sentence. I'm now 2 minutes into his video, and as usual with these creationist fools, the debunking of his nonsense takes way longer than his original talking points. Some of my viewers address this in my comment section, and they say, you only let Ray Comfort or Frank Turek or William Lane Craig talk for a few seconds, and then you already interrupt them. Yes, of course I do. I don't have any other choice. People like them say ridiculous stuff in every sentence. If I let them talk for a full minute, I need to make a 1-hour video to refute all of their gibberish. That is why I usually can only address a small portion of their nonsense. If creationists want me to let them talk, they should talk less nonsense and say more stuff that is true. But anyway, this guy is so wrong on such a fundamental level that you have to stand in awe for his monumental stupidity. He thinks that a spherical rock must be intelligently designed because it has a pattern, and nature, he thinks, is random, so it doesn't produce patterns. And then he thinks that because the chances of a rock randomly getting a spherical shape are next to nothing, the spherical shape must be designed and created by a god. And all of that is based upon his delusion that everything in nature is random, which is nonsense. You complete onion soup for brains, sweet Uncle Frodo. So let me explain. How do rocks get their shape? Make a guess. Where do these nice little round rocks that we can find in every riverbed, where do they come from? They come from bigger rocks. Did you guess that? Little rocks are pieces of bigger rocks that at some point in time broke into pieces by forces of nature. And then instead of one big rock, we have 1,000 smaller rocks with rugged, irregular shapes. And then what happens? Well, these forces of nature keep working on these little rugged rocks over the course of millions of years, and sometimes a bit more quickly, sometimes over the course of thousands of years. Rocks tumble from mountains. They end up in rivers where they are flushed for hundreds and sometimes thousands of miles to eventually end up at some shore or riverbank. During those millions of years, these little rocks, they tumble and fall millions upon millions of times, and they collide with billions upon billions of sand and dust particles and other little rocks, and billions of gallons of water and air, and all of those billions of collisions erode that rock. And all that sand, rock, dust, wind and water is more likely to erode the parts of the rock that are located further away from its center of gravity. Stuff that sticks out from the middle is the first thing that breaks and is ditched. The same thing applies when a rock is rolling from a hill. The parts of the rock that are located further from its center of gravity will receive more beating than other parts of the rock. Any rock that would roll from an endless slope would eventually turn into a sphere, because every part that sticks out from the middle more than the other parts of the rock will be lost, slowly but surely turning the rock into a sphere. So, natural erosion processes are such that they are very likely to result in disc and spherical shapes. Nature is not always random. Gravity and other laws of nature cause patterns, and these processes are easily demonstrated with little cubes of clay. Just make a little cube of clay and just give that cube nice sharp edges and nice straight surfaces. Then let it dry for a day or two so that it becomes a nice hard cube of clay. Then take it outside and then gently try to roll it on the tarmac as if it were a dice. Just use that little clay cube to imitate the process of a rock rolling from a hill and getting beating from particles and objects surrounding it. If you do that with that little cube of clay for about 10 minutes, you will notice that your little cube is no more a cube. It will slowly lose its sharp edges and corners. Then put that cube under a running water tap for 5 minutes. Again, more sharp edges and corners of your cube will disappear. Your cube is slowly turning into a sphere. And that is exactly how natural erosion of rocks works. Nature can easily produce rocks with spherical shapes. That is why, contrary to what you think, nature is not always random. Natural forces, such as gravity, they've got fixed values. They produce the same type of result over and over again. If I let go of my marker, it will drop on the table now. If I do that tomorrow, the same thing will happen. If I do it 1,000,000 times, I will always get the same result. The whole basis of your plea, being that nature is always random, is totally wrong, and anyone can demonstrate that your idea is total nonsense. And again, the same thing happens as with all the other creationist fools. This guy wanted to disprove evolution with mathematics, and I review his video. But long before he can make his actual point, he totally fails in understanding how to apply mathematics in the first place. So whatever calculations he will produce, it's going to be meaningless, because his entire premise, that nature is always random, is totally wrong. And if he doesn't even understand that, then there is nothing I can do for him. All I can do now is ask my viewers, are you subscribed yet to my channel? If not, then please hit that subscribe button, because then you will support me in making more videos in which I address more of these fools and spread critical thinking and the sound of science.